It's a very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of our program, Today's Youth. And of course, today we are delighted to be joined in the studio by a very special guest. But first, a short break and we'll be right back. Do stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're delighted to be joined today in the studio by a very special guest who's joining us on today's edition of Today's Youth, and that is Layla Khaled Youssef. A very good afternoon to you, Layla.
I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. So, Layla, let's talk a bit more about yourself. Tell me a bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, and some of your interests.
I was born and raised in Albany, New York. I am currently studying international studies, political science, and Islamic studies at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. My interests are very broad, but I am very interested in obviously studying politics, as you can tell with what
with your interests.
Yeah. But also I play soccer, I play the violin, so.
Okay, so you're multi-talented, multi-dimensional. Thank God, indeed. Yeah. Layla, let's talk a bit about yourself. When you were being brought up in your younger years, did you used to come and visit Egypt? Did you come back home for visits, or were you constantly over in the United States?
When I was younger, we used to only come to Egypt like every 2 years or something over the summer. And then once I was in middle school or high school, my parents decided to make us come. I have a brother, so they would make me and my brother come every year, so that way we didn't like forget the language or the culture.
Yes.
But from a very young age, even if I didn't go to Egypt every summer, my mom at home would make sure that we would speak Arabic and that we would watch shows so we wouldn't forget the language or the culture.
Yes, indeed. So tell me, when you used to come for these holidays over the years, how did you find Egypt? Did you enjoy the holidays, or were they mandatory?
No, I always enjoyed the holidays, but it wasn't until about 2016 that I started really enjoying Egypt. That was when I joined the Egyptian national team, and I started having much more love and admiration for Egypt. Before, I had viewed Egypt as a very utopian country. I would just go to the beaches, or I would spend time with my family, but I was very isolated. But then after I joined the national team, I began to find out people from different socioeconomic statuses, and I began to learn more about the economic and political status of Egypt. So that made me truly love Egypt and learn more about it. So.
Indeed. So, Layla, you mentioned 2016, a very important year, especially after the revolutions and with all the instability in the beginning, then the economic reform and the new Egypt, or the new reformation of the Egyptian economy and the Egyptian leadership in general, politics, and the whole country. Tell me how you saw this change. Could you tell that there was a reform underway? Could you tell that there was a change in policies since you used to come more often to visit the country?
Absolutely. I think because I come every year, I'm able to see very distinctly the difference between every single year. I will say, just in general, like women's rights, for example, I've seen that increase every year that I come. As an Egyptian girl playing soccer, it's something that's been difficult, but it gets easier every year I come. In general, the political stability, which in the beginning was very difficult, and I was watching it from the United States, and I was hearing what the American version of what was occurring, but then seeing what was actually happening in Egypt was on the ground. Yeah, it was very interesting to see the disparity. But definitely, I will say, with the new regime and with what's been going on recently, I will say Egypt is going definitely and headed into the right direction.
Indeed. Tell me, related to women soccer, you play women's soccer on the national team. Why soccer specifically?
In the beginning, I used to play basketball, and I was really bad at basketball. So I was like, I'll try soccer. And I used to only make the team because I was fast. I didn't know how to kick the ball at all. I would just toe it into the goal. Yeah. But then I truly began to love the sport, not just not just like playing it, but the people around it, the culture that it surrounds. Soccer, you can play with anyone. It doesn't matter where you're from or who your parents are, any of that stuff. It just, everyone can play it. So I really love that about the sport.
That's the beauty really of sports. It removes any divides, whether economic or social or even religious, political. It removes that edge. So tell me, Layla, the interest in politics. I mean, you're quite young. Why specifically this field? What inspired you really to think of, you know, political field as a field of study?
Yeah, so from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to become, my end goal is to become U.S. ambassador to Egypt, or to become a politician or a UN ambassador. But it really began in 2013 when I met a Syrian refugee. He didn't have any, both his arms were amputated. His whole family had passed away. And the Syrian refugee crisis, which began in March 2011, had still been going on for 2 years. And he had losses. He was an orphan. He didn't even have arms, and he was smiling. And he was very happy. And I got to speak with him about what he had dealt with and what he had seen firsthand. So then I became interested in the Syrian refugee crisis specifically. As soon as I heard about his story, I presented to Congressman Paul Tonko. He's the congressman of the 20th District of New York. I created a petition with about 500 signatures in support of a bill that promised about $1 million of humanitarian aid to Syrian refugees. And at that time, Congress was not really willing to aid in the Syrian refugee crisis. It was mainly the UN. And then from there, I just continued. I would just do interviews. I would give speeches about what was occurring with the Syrian refugee crisis, because nobody really knows, but it's the largest humanitarian crisis since World War II. Egypt itself is a very large recipient of the 6.7 million Syrian refugees, 6.6 million of which are also displaced within Syria. Germany has received a lot, but so has Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and Egypt. So I think it's a very, very disheartening crisis that has been going on for way too long, and everyone should not just be educated about it, but try to support it in any way possible. Like, I know in Germany, there were German families that took in Syrian refugees so they could assimilate more. So
I mean, even here in Egypt, we never really treated them as refugees. They kind of blended in the Egyptian society, and they've become business owners and part of the communities really that they live in. Have you noticed the difference?
I think it was easier within Egypt because there wasn't a language barrier. But definitely with the refugees who are going to the EU, like Italy or Greece or Germany, not only has there become a language barrier, but there's also Islamophobia that exists, or xenophobia, in which the certain people within those countries do not want foreigners coming, or they believe they'll take their jobs, or that type of mindset. So like reading about that, or reading how Europe has become much more xenophobic in the recent years as a result of the Syrian refugee crisis, that has certainly been very disheartening, and I've seen it especially in my own country, in the United States. So that's why I became very interested in politics, and that's why I hope to continue.
Indeed, right. Ladies and gentlemen, a very short break, and we'll be right back with our guest here in the studio, Layla Khaled Youssef. Do stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and still with you on today's edition of Today's Youth, and we're delighted to be joined in the studio by our guest, Layla. Once again, thank you so much for coming in this afternoon, Layla. Let's talk about your tertiary education. You went to a very prestigious university. Are you pursuing any postgrad studies?
Yeah.
Could you tell me a bit more?
Yeah, I hope to attend law school, and I hope to go into international law. My first step will hopefully be to enter the United Nations or the State Department, and then hopefully, as I said, to work within the U.S. Embassy in Cairo.
What exactly have you studied? What have you graduated from?
So right now, I'm a double major with international studies and political science, and my minor is in Islamic studies. But my main focus, I like to study Russian geopolitics. So I'm currently learning Russian, for example, because I think that it would be very useful to, if I do hopefully one day become a diplomat on behalf of the United States or Egypt, to be able to speak to Russia, a country that is deeply involved not only in the Middle East, but currently in the affairs of the United States as well. So to be able to speak in the mother tongue with a Russian diplomat or a Russian person, that will be a very big advantage for me.
Tell me, since you studied things related to politics and political science, how do you see the representation of different ideologies in different countries. So, for example, whilst the revolution was ongoing in Egypt, surely there was a different perception of it and a different representation of it in the United States, for example, as well as in different countries in the European Union, etc. How do you see the power of representation, maybe the role that media, especially mainstream media, can play in shifting, shifting focus from one point to another, and the role that they can play in issues that interest you, for example, the Syrian refugee crisis, for example?
Yeah, I think one of the crises that I've seen that occur most with has been the Uyghur crisis in China and the Xinjiang region. And there's definitely been a disparity between what the UN reports and what the Chinese government will report. So especially with the revolution, the Egyptian revolution that occurred, I could very much see what my family was telling me versus what the news, the CNN, for example, was telling me. So ever since I saw that occur firsthand, I've gone with my own motto to only learn about a country by meeting a person from that country or by visiting it, not through media or not through news coverage. Although oftentimes it can be factual, you never know, so I think it's best to always speak with a person who's gone through it itself. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because there's all these ideologies that are under play as well, when it's mainstream representation. Right, Layla, let's talk also a bit about when you were growing up in the United States and someone would ask you, where are you from? You look Brazilian, Latin American. I'm sure you got that a lot, but then you'd say, no, I'm actually Egyptian. What was their first reaction to that?
They would always say, wow. No, I'm extremely proud of being Egyptian. Even at my university, I'm like, everyone knows she's the girl from Egypt. I'm very, very proud. And I think that's not true for a lot of Egyptians who study abroad. Because they've lived here their whole life, so they think of Egypt as just like a normal country. Like for me, I think of the United States as normal. But with, for example, the recent efforts done by the Minister of Immigration, Nabila Makram-Abeid, she has very much made us extremely proud of being Egyptian, and not only proud from within ourselves, but also educated. So, for example, she's educated us about the October 6th war of 1973, telling us about what we can say if somebody addresses us about that. So I've definitely, if I'm ever asked, I'm always saying I'm Egyptian, and I'm very proud.
Indeed. There's a picture as well of you with the minister, Nabila Makram. Tell me a bit about this program. They reached out to you. Tell me exactly what happened. How did they contact you? What did they say? And what did you do when you came to Egypt?
So there's a group called Egyptian Students Studying Abroad.
Yes.
And it began as a very, very small group. It was like 8 people, and right now I think it's like over 200 students. And the reason it's very interesting is because people are from all over the place. People are from Malaysia or Germany or France or the United States or China. So definitely meeting those students and knowing that if I ever go visit one of those countries, I'll have someone that can come get me from the airport or that I can spend time with. It's been a very great networking experience.
Indeed.
And about every week there's 1 or 2 events. So for example, the most recent event was we went to visit the Palace Abdin, and we got to learn about Egyptian history and how, because we've all heard about the Buckingham Palace or Versailles in France, but like seeing in our own country such a beautiful palace, which everyone should visit. It has been a great experience and very, very informative for us, especially as Egyptians who will go back hopefully to our countries that we study in or that we were born in. It's very important.
Right. Let's talk a bit about some of the other places you visited with this program. Where else have they taken you? And you said it's also educational. It teaches you about your country, the history, and some of the people that you met as well.
So we went to also Galila University, and we got to learn about the new courses that will teach and how a lot of Egyptians want to study abroad. That's their goal. Like, I want to finish Thanawi Amma, or I want to finish my SAT, and then I want to study abroad. But why not study in your own country? So Galila University is this newly founded university, and what I've seen from it, it's going to be great. And we got to visit it and see the whole. It's not only a very prestigious university, but also the area it's in is very nice. We also, one of my favorite events was we got to go to to learn about the Ethiopian dam with another minister.
Rights.
Yes, and that was very interesting because I've been studying that crisis. It's been going on since 2010, but I've been studying it for the past couple of years. But being able to speak directly with the minister and him explain to us the facts and the statistics and the fact that Egypt does not want to take away Ethiopia's water rights or infringe on Ethiopia's sovereignty, but it's simply a fact that Egypt is extremely dependent on a single source of water and that the dam has to be completed within a time that fits the timeline of Sudan and Egypt.
Indeed, very interesting and very informative visits for you as well. Tell me, did you meet other Egyptians on this program from different countries?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is their perception when they come? Have they visited Egypt recently, or had they spent years away from home?
Most of them, I will say, have just been abroad for about 2 or 3 years. Most of them were raised here their whole life, and then they applied for a university abroad, and that's when they went. I'm one of the few people that was completely raised and born in another country, and then I would come every summer. But definitely, I've met so many Egyptians. Some of them are not even fully Egyptian. Some of them are like French or come from another country, but they go to Egypt every summer or something. So I've definitely met and made relationships that I'll cherish for a while.
Indeed. So tell me, what do you plan to do after you finish your studies? Do you plan to come back home? Do you plan to work here? What's the end game for you?
My end goal is to definitely come back to Egypt because from the United States is a great country, but just Egypt, there's something different about it. The culture, the people. No matter how much we make fun of our country, there's still nothing like it. So I will definitely pursue and continue my studies in the United States, hopefully attend law school, inshallah. But then my end goal will be to work in Egypt.
So you do think of coming back. How about your brother? You have a brother, you
I have a brother, yeah.
Does he ever think of coming back home, or is he happy over?
My brother is like the exact opposite of me. He likes the United States more than Egypt. He loves coming here and spending time with his family and friends, but I think he has more friends there, or he gets along with people more there. So I think he'll stay.
And how about your parents? Do they encourage you to come back to Egypt to work here? They're fine with that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom is she loves Egypt. Like I'm more like her, but my dad is just like, he's moderate. He's like, okay,
do what you want.
Yeah, go if you want. But he definitely likes when I come to Egypt because I'm around people of similar culture, because in America it's a very, very different culture.
Indeed.
And in my household I was raised like very strict, like an Egyptian household, Muslim, yeah. But so he really does like when I come to Egypt because I can be surrounded by people that are like me. It's a little bit easier. But my mom definitely is the one that would make me watch Egyptian films, or she'd be like, no, speak Arabic. Yeah, or do this. So yeah.
Right, Layla, let's talk a bit about when you come to Egypt, and over the years you've obviously seen a change. You play, for example, football or soccer with the national team, with lots of women. Have you seen a change in women's representation over the years, over the last few years? Women have started playing a more proactive role, whether it's politically, economically, socially, taking part, for example, in voting elections, more representation in the Egyptian parliament, in the government itself, etc. Have you physically been able to see that there are more Egyptian women now in positions of power and leadership, whether politically or economically?
Yes, I've seen that firsthand, not only politically, like for the Minister of Immigration, Nabila Makram, she's a woman and she's a very strong woman, but also I've seen it firsthand in soccer. So obviously sexual harassment is an issue that persists and that I think every Egyptian woman has unfortunately dealt with. But just for example, women being able to
seeing the ability to be able to speak out and get your rights.
Yeah, women have been able to definitely stand, especially in soccer. I've seen that firsthand.
Which is a great achievement really over the years.
Yes.
Right, Layla, let's talk a bit about, I can see, where is this picture?
Oh,
that was you giving a speech.
Yes, I was giving a speech to the President of Egypt and the Foreign Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs.
What was the speech about?
The speech was about combating threats to international peace and security. I was the United States delegate, but I was speaking on behalf of the plurinational state of Bolivia, specifically on the financing of terrorist organizations. And I've been going to the World Youth Forum for the past 3 years, and it's definitely been a great conference.
Let's talk a bit about this World Youth Forum and the Presidential Leadership Program, another milestone when it comes to empowering Egyptian youth. Tell me a bit about how you got involved in it and your experience.
So they reached out to me in 2017, and I remember I had classes during that time, so I was like, no, I probably shouldn't go, but I mean, who would deny giving a speech to the president? So it was, when I went, it was a very wonderful experience. I got to be placed in a program with the United Nations delegates, and it was 60 students from all around the globe. So, for example, the student from China, he would represent France, or the student from Russia would represent Bolivia, or like another. I was representing Bolivia, but they would represent Spain or another country.
To get you guys to learn more about each other's
Absolutely, and it was the reason the World Youth Forum was such a unique experience was because you got to sit in the room with influential world leaders, with these key figures
and
that
actually have them listening to you.
Absolutely, and they do listen. I was President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He sat during like the 2-hour speeches, and he listened. At the end, he shook our hands and he spoke with us. So it was a very wonderful experience. It truly showed me that no, the president of Egypt does listen to the youth, and it was a wonderful experience.
Tell me, you said you took part 3 times. The second and third time were obviously your endeavor to take part.
Yes, I wanted to.
Where were they? Which ones did you take part in?
So I went to all 3 of them, but they were all in Sharm el-Sheikh, but they were all different. Like for the first one, I got to speak about combating threats to international peace and security. It was part of the United Nations Security Council. The second time it was about Arab and African cooperation between the Arab League and the African Union. Unfortunately, there does tend to be a divide between North Africa and yeah, you're South African.
Yes, I would know. Yes.
So every year it's they discuss something different, and it's such a wide conference with thousands of people from all around the globe. So I got to make relationships with people from Japan or from all these other countries, and it was wonderful.
And what was their perception about Egypt? Some of them it was their first time to visit Egypt, especially the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh, a beautiful spot.
Beautiful.
So how did they feel? Did they believe that this was Egypt, or was it not close to the stereotype that I'm sure they were exposed to, the pyramids and you know?
No, they were all I remember they were all very surprised. They were like, oh my God, wow, like we didn't think it would be like this, especially because the conference, for such a large group of people, it was organized so well, and everything. I remember we'd go back to the hotel rooms every night, and there'd be a present on the bed, or there would be like buffets, or whatever you want, you would get. But at the same time, they emphasized, like, we're going to treat you very well, but also we want you to learn. We want you to learn about Egypt and what Egypt is doing in the international community. And I definitely do think that this conference fostered a lot of mini ambassadors of Egypt who would go back to their home countries and say, oh, I just attended this conference in Egypt and XYZ is what happened. So that's ultimately why I'd say the conference was very successful. And from what I was hearing from people around me, because like, for example, I got really close with somebody from Japan, and she went back and she went and gave a speech at her university about what she learned in Egypt and how Egyptian politics is different than what you might see covered by the media.
So that's, I suppose that's really the goal, just to get to know different people and learn about each other's cultures. And it is a very eye-opening experience indeed. Tell me, on a personal note now, Laila, when you travel in Egypt, what are your favorite spots? Where do you like